Andy Weir, author of sci-fi novels The Martian and Project Hail Mary, apparently hates social commentary. The following statement resurfaced a couple of months ago, but originally comes from a 2017 interview about his novel Artemis, where he references the modern run of Star Trek shows. Quote, "For instance, as a lifelong Star Trek fan, it's always bothered me that there is a presumed responsibility within Star Trek shows to talk about social issues. I just want to watch Romulans and the Federation shoot at each other." Social commentary is, in some ways, inherent to stories, and it's almost impossible to write a story without any. Andy Weir, for one, absolutely has social commentary in his stories. Take his latest work, Project Hail Mary, the story of a scientist working alongside an alien with whom he does not share a language to save both of their homeworlds from climate change. When it comes to Star Trek, I'm curious what he means by presumed responsibility to talk about social issues. That's just what Trek is, and it always was. Just look at the cast of the original series. You think it's an accident that the main cast included, alongside 3 white Americans, a Scottish man during the Scottish independence movement, a black woman during the civil rights movement, a Japanese man just 20 years after the US nuked Hiroshima and Nagasaki, a Russian man in the middle of the Cold War, and even a Jewish alien? What gives people like Weir the idea that Star Trek would ever be anything but social commentary with a sci-fi coat of paint? But if we take him at his word, Weir just wants to watch the Romulans and Federation shoot at each other, right? Well, let's talk about the Romulans and the Federation. The first time Star Trek introduced the Romulans was in the 1966 episode of Star Trek The Original Series, Balance of Terror. Notably, you don't see that much shooting, and the story is about racism and xenophobia. It feels wrong to even call it an allegory because it's so blatant. The Enterprise confronts a Romulan ship. It's called a Bird of Prey, if you're interested, that has attacked Federation bases along the neutral zone that was established a century earlier after a war between the two powers. At that time, Federation ships didn't have much in the way of visual communications, so no one from the Federation ever got a close look at the Romulans. Consequently, no one knew what Romulans looked like by the time of Balance of Terror.
I'm pointing out that we could have Romulan spies aboard this ship.
When the crew finally gets a look at their foes, it turns out they look a whole lot like Vulcans. Everyone immediately turns to Spock, the only Vulcan on the Enterprise. Most officers say nothing, probably unsure of what to make of it, but one Lieutenant Stiles, whose family fought in the previous war, can't help himself.
I was suggesting that Mr. Spock could probably translate it for you, sir.
I assume you're complimenting Mr. Spock on his ability to decode.
I'm not sure, sir.
And Captain Kirk delivers the social commentary with no chaser.
Well, here's one thing you can be sure of, mister. Leave any bigotry in your quarters. There's no room for it on the bridge. Do I make myself clear?
You do, sir.
Incidentally, the episode is also about a dying empire trying to start a war in hopes of recapturing its former glory. So,
if an Earthship, why does he not attack?
First, study the enemy, seek weakness. If I were their commander, that is what I would do.
The Romulan commander can't conceive of a society that does not seek war, that does not live for glory and valor. He has the paranoid attitude of a waning empire, kind of like the United States. We can't see what's in the mind of our leaders, but the US government essentially acts as though its guiding principle is, if we don't kill them, they'll kill us. That's certainly how they sell wars to the public, including the current war with Iran, right? They've been imminently about to build a nuke and imminently drop it on DC for 47 imminent years. The rejection and ignorance of media analysis comes down to literacy. Apparently, quote, 54% of US adults read below the equivalent of a 6th grade level, and 64% of our country's 4th graders do not read proficiently. That means even the people who are supposed to read below a 6th grade level aren't at the level they should be. When adults read below a 6th grade level, this is what's known as functional illiteracy. You can read words and sentences, but beyond the basics, you're not gleaning all that much from what you read or hear. That stat comes from the National Center for Education Statistics, by the way, which is a part of the Department of Education. So if you'd like to look into it, Get in now while you still can. Part of reading at a 6th grade level includes the ability to recognize and understand subtext. Stories aren't just a series of things happening. There are multiple layers. I sucked at this in school, by the way. Lord knows how I managed to get a writing degree. So I'm not trying to be condescending, I'm just trying to stress how important this is. And the left needs to make sure literacy and education are among our priorities. In addition to advocating for it at a societal level, we should probably offer more services on the ground level. There's nothing wrong with your Leninist reading group, but we should also help people read and comprehend better in the first place. Let's look at the Star Trek example. What is Balance of Terror about? On the first level, it's what Weir said. The Romulans and Federation shoot at each other. There's an attack, a chase, a standoff, a battle, and a resolution. Again, you don't see that much shooting on screen, but on the surface, it's a battle. Then there's what we might call textual commentary. Stiles has a clear prejudice against Romulans, which extends to his crewmate who simply looks similar to a Romulan. Kirk explicitly says that bigotry is not allowed. The message is stated outright. If I'm as charitable as possible, maybe this is the part that bothers Weir and his counterparts. Maybe it's just too blatant for them, and that's fine. You don't have to like everything. But if we dig a little deeper, there's another layer even just to Kirk's comment. It hints at the type of society they have back on Earth and throughout the Federation. In Roddenberry's words, by the 2260s, humans have learned to, quote, take a delight in the essential differences between men and between cultures, and that, quote, differences in ideas and attitudes are a delight, part of life's exciting variety, not something to fear. About a century after Kirk's time, Picard says this plainly.
People are no longer obsessed with the accumulation of things. We've eliminated hunger, want, the need for possessions. We've grown out of our infancy.
The Vulcans, who are also Federation citizens, seek IDIC, infinite diversity in infinite combinations. If this sounds like woke garbage to you, or if you can't imagine ever creating a world like this, or you're just yelling at me that it's not that deep, think about who benefits from that attitude. Is it you? Thanks for watching this far. If you like what I do here, please like, comment, and subscribe. And if you can, help me out on Patreon. This is a one-man operation, and the more you support, the more I can create. Now, back to the video. The harm of the curtains were just blue line of thinking isn't that people refuse to deeply analyze their books for symbolism or deeper themes. It's that people refuse to acknowledge that all forms of literature and language, like every form of art, subtly influences our beliefs and mindsets about the world, even if we don't explicitly recognize it. This quote comes from a Substack called Reading Playfully, which I'm officially plugging here because I think it's great. In the piece, The Curtains Are Just Blue, and Other Things I Hate, the author, Nat, argues that, quote, much of high school literature can feel meaningless to the average student because we are never given a greater reason as to why literary analysis is applicable in our day-to-day lives. Again, I sucked at this in school, and I think a lot of people who were better at it or appeared to be very good at it probably learned it by rote to get through the class with a good grade. This is the problem with how some of our education system works. They lay out how language can be used to increase understanding or as a political weapon, and how these are rarely taught as practical applications of literary analysis. In other words, such analysis is supposed to protect you from manipulation and teach you to spot the sometimes subtle differences. Nat says this is creating, quote, a population that resists the possibility of language as a tool for influence. And what I see in that population is insensitive, incurious, disinterested people who increasingly don't know anything, don't care about anything, and are vulnerable to manipulation. This is why the Black Panthers and every revolutionary socialist government emphasized literacy programs. There's no virtue in not understanding how the ruling class influences your behavior. I'm not even saying that social commentary is always leftist, or that you can't enjoy media or get something out of media that doesn't have your exact politics. In my opinion, action movies are generally right-wing coded. They tend to glorify cops, the military, the US in general, portray the villains as one-dimensional terrorists, and present lone gunmen who break all the rules as the solution to every problem. This is sort of the superhero problem too. But Die Hard is one of my favorite movies of all time, and it absolutely contains right-wing social commentary. What's one of the most memorable lines from Die Hard? Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker.
Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker.
Maybe you never put that much thought into it, which is fine, but what happens in the couple of minutes leading up to John McClane saying yippee-ki-yay? He and Hans Gruber trade barbs over the radio about Europe and the US. Gruber dismisses McClane's antics as some American cowboy fantasy. He's just trying to be John Wayne. The name John McClane even seems like it was meant to sound like John Wayne, although he was more partial to Roy Rogers.
I was always kind of partial to Roy Rogers, actually.
Gruber calls him Mr. Cowboy. McClane responds, yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker, and we're on to the next scene. Again, what you probably remember from that scene is yippee-ki-yay, because it's a great line, but their conversation, which contains social commentary, is what made yippee-ki-yay matter. We could even go a little deeper with Die Hard. What else was happening in the world in 1988 when the movie was released? American anxieties about Japanese businesses taking over, men fretting about women with careers and no-fault divorce, veneration of police during the Reagan-Republican tough-on-crime era, and so on. Artists and their art are products of their environment and time period. And I hate to break it to you, but very often these portrayals are intentional, whether it's simply because of artistic choices or overtly political goals. Politics didn't taint your previously non-political, small bean art. You just don't like the politics of some art, and it's okay to admit that. The military equipment and pro-military, pro-CIA sentiment you see in all sorts of Hollywood movies comes from direct coordination between studios and the military and/or CIA, whichever the case may be. The Department of Defense and the CIA each have a dedicated office for engaging with the film and television industry. If you try to make a movie or a show with military equipment in it, or with a story about the military or CIA, the DoD and CIA get final approval over every creative decision about that project. It's called the Military Entertainment Complex, and it's 100% real. It's too much to get into in this video, but when you're done here, go check out this video from a channel called Moon, which explains it all. Speaking of Reagan, here's what his education advisor Roger Freeman said about education in 1970 during Reagan's re-election campaign for governor of California. "We are in danger of producing an educated proletariat. That's dynamite. We have to be selective on who we allow to go to college. If not," Freeman continued, "we will have a large number of highly trained and unemployed people. That's what happened in Germany. I saw it happen." Just to be clear, he's talking about the rise of fascism and Nazi Germany at the end there. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that mass unemployment in Weimar Germany and the rise of the Nazis had more to do with losing World War I, maybe overextending your colonization project and losing so bad that your neighbors wouldn't let you participate in the global economy anymore, had worse effects on employment than letting too many people go to college. Or it could also be that capitalism necessitates a certain amount of unemployment to keep the army of surplus labor available at all times, anytime you need to pull from them, and keep the rest of the working class in fear of falling into poverty. But what the fuck do I know? And he said this in response to questions about Reagan shutting down all 28 UC and Cal State campuses because there were too many student protests against the Vietnam War and the US bombing of Cambodia. Sound familiar? If you embrace anti-intellectualism, you're helping the ruling class. They don't want you to think and learn and grow or understand your surroundings and the conditions people like you live under. This is what is at stake when you disengage, and the left needs to keep literacy front and center in our movement.